Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is acref. On this channel I basically release ministry content, so any content that has to do with Jesus, fitness, and yeah, pretty much. So today is actually going to be interesting. Before I start, I want to say that, thank you so much for supporting me so far, and I hope that you're doing well. I know, we're in dark days, but just hang in there. And I hope that as you listen to my video today, it edifies your spirit. And yeah, I'm actually filming on my camera today, which is really fun. Hopefully that which happened the other day doesn't happen again, and I wouldn't have to switch to my phone. But yeah, let's just right into today's video. So today's video, we're going to be talking about the anthropomorphism of we're going to be talking about the use of anthropomorphism to understand the intent of the devil in your life and what the agenda of Jesus really is. So I'm gonna try to be as creative as I can with the title, but for starters, I want you to understand what anthropomorphism really is. It's the attribution of human characters, especially mental or emotional, to other beings or entities. So today an example of the use of anthropomorphism is going to be with the use of animals. We're going to be analyzing a literature book, but we're going to be picking a chapter from the book. The book is basically called One Good Story, That One Stories. It's going to be linked down below in case you want to access the book. I don't feel like you can access the book if you're not you probably need to be registered to a library, an online library, if you want to access the book. Or if you are in university, you can access the book through your university online library, or if they do have the physical book, then that would be great. But today we're going to be analyzing the book called One Good Story, That One Stories. So basically this book is it's by Thomas King, and a little bit about Thomas King. Let's just go through a little background about him. So Thomas King is a Canadian writer, is a broadcast presenter who most often writes about First Nation. So basically that's just the Wikipedia bits about Thomas King. He mostly writes about First Nation. I believe he's also he's lived around those areas. Last I checked, my professor told me that he lives in Gulf, I believe, and it's very close to Ontario, if you live in Ontario. All right, so basically that's what we're going to be talking about this book. We're going to be linking it to scriptures and how we can really understand the intent of the devil. First of all, I feel like we all know that First Nations are not Christians, right? And we see the history in how they, in their words, said that they were assimilated into the Canadian culture, and a part of Canadian culture, because it's so linked to the Queen, is that they believe in God, right? And during those times they basically they say they were colonized by the white people. I would say in quote because I wasn't there at that time. It's what they say that we tend to believe, right? So they said they were colonized by the white people, and mostly priests, because the priests were the people who had higher power at the time. And we talk about the residential schools happening. I don't know if you've been educated on indigenous culture and the history. If you're a student from Canada, you probably have been exposed to things like this. So basically they say they went through residential school. Awful things happened to them, very terrible things, and many of them were raped and molested. Was what that's what I've been documented that happened during those times. I feel like it's really important, and they before then were very much deep into idolatry. I feel like you need to watch this movie called Molokai. I'm actually going to be linking all of these resources down there in case you are interested in this topic right here. It's a very interesting topic. I want to see if I'm actually pronouncing this name of the movie well. Yeah, it's called Molokai. It's 1999. It's about this priest who sacrificed himself to actually bring help to this very small population who lived on a reserve, right? Aboriginal people often live on reserves, and they were, you know, plagued with diverse, you know, there was an epidemic there, and they were plagued with, you know, some type of disease. So he went there to like care for them and to preach the word to them, and you find that many people give their life to Christ, and many things happen in the movie. But at the end of the day, the Pope who sacrificed himself died, and you know, that's the really, you know, and we're gonna get there. Just keep that in your mind, that the priest sacrificed himself for the sake of, you know, preaching the gospel. Okay, so I would definitely recommend you watch Molokai. I study health policy at, you know, York University, and you know, I was often confused about why I was actually like pursuing this program, because I went from kinesiology to health policy. But you know, as I watched the movie, I realized, like, you know, there was an illumination as to why I was doing what I was doing. Like, at the end of the day, like, you're gonna pick sides. There are two sides. Like, you can either pick the side of the devil and the sides of God, you know. And certain occupation that you do, certain profession that you do, you find that, you know, the corruption is going to be very dense. Like, for example, a child of God saying he or she wants to pursue politics, and you know, you might have the intention that, well, I want to change things in government, and you get in there and you're just corrupted. You know, we can even reference Daniel. We can see how they actually, these adversaries were wanting to corrupt Daniel, and he went through diverse, you know, situations. I feel like a lot of people just pick programs, they pick, you know, occupations without really analyzing the consequence of their actions. And if you are a different species, like if you have a different agenda going into like a certain program or occupation, you really have to realize that you're gonna have to suffer immense, you know, persecution, especially if you want to cause change. Like, you know, you can't just come into a group of people who have been doing stuff like, you know, the same way all their lives, and you think that you want to cause a change, and you think that you're not going to go through persecution, you know, because of your agenda. Even Jesus had to go through immense pain, okay? And we are supposed to live like Jesus. But I digress from what we're actually talking today. I just wanted to give you a brief, you know, summary of what we're going to be talking about today. Let's just, you know, be brief introduction into who Thomas King is. You know, he writes about, you know, First Nation, and you know, a little background about First Nation, right? And you know, the colonialism history, you know, a little bit about who they are right now at this very present moment. We can say, like, you know, some of them are very few of them are Christians, I would say, and because most of them live on reserves, right? They're very isolated from actual like civilization, right? So most of them actually are still very much attached to their culture. And when we talk about reconciliation, you know, they're talking about, you know, going back to their former culture, idolatry. That's what they want to go back to. You know, I just want to put that into your mind as to what's really going on in this present moment. They talk about, you know, how their identity has been tarnished. You know, they want to hug onto like what they've been, you know, taught to believe, you know, in the past by their ancestors. And I feel like the Aboriginal story and the history is something that you can actually relate to, you know, your life. Like, what was your ancestors doing? How are you wanting to detach from that and to hug on to a foreign, you know, tradition and a foreign a way of life? I wouldn't essentially call Christianity a religion, because if you are actually following the ways of the Lord, you become spiritual and you become, you know, one with God, and you have a relationship with God. And it's not going to be like some set of rules that you're following. It's going to be like a way of life for you. So I feel like, you know, this, if you look at it from a more external point of view, you realize that, you know, they're going to be talking about things of power and control and all of those things. And during those times, those were the things that were really like, you know, around the story of the First Nation and the Christians, right? The priests, those people who had power, right? You know, if you control the media, if you control the mind, the will of the people, then you do have power. And I feel like, yes, I just want to stipulate something that, you know, if, you know, the priest, and I said that before in the other video, that if the priests were, you know, treated the First Nations like a certain way, even if, you know, diverse situations were happened at that time, like I would always say that, you know, God is not man. Even though he worked through the priest to bring them closer to him, and the priest actually backslid, you know, it's not like they're not God. Like, God is God, and God is holy, and God is faithful. So if the priest actually let them down, then it's obvious that, you know, the relationship that they thought that they were building with God was not obviously with God, but with the priests themselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, you know, that's why it's so important for you to have a personal relationship with God, not with your pastor, not with your church members. You know, you have a healthy relationship with other people, but the relationship that you have with God is most important, because when you have a relationship with God, there is nothing that could ever tear you away from him, and God is always wanting to protect you. Do you understand what I'm saying? So even at the time when all these things were happening, God will protect you from all those things. Okay, so I feel like it's just good for us to just go into like the text right away. It's really interesting because we find the character, even the writer Thomas King, as he's writing the story, is taking up the personality of devil himself. The devil is a deceiver. He is the one to hide stuff, is the one to, you know, do all manner of manipulation just to bring people into the story, to draw people into the story. This, you know, text was actually you know, a part of, you know, the course material for one of my courses that I'm taking, and like I define anthropomorphism as, you know, attributes and physical characteristics, especially mental and emotional, to other beings. For example, you might start to write a story and you're using, like, you know, an animal, or you're using a spoon. You try to relate your emotions and your physical state to that present, to that thing, you know, that tangible thing, right? Okay, so I'm glad that you do understand what anthropomorphism is. Today we're going to be analyzing a story. I'm going to actually read the story to you. If you want to open the link that I'm posting down below, you can go read it. But if you don't have access to the story, then, you know, you can just follow along and just listen to me. Right, okay, so it's actually a long one, so if you want to go grab like a coffee, a tea, or something, like snacks or something, you know, just go grab it, and we're gonna get right into it. It's actually pretty long. It's actually gonna be a long video, guys. All right, so the title is actually the one about Coyote going west. Okay, all right, so I begin. All right, so this one is about Coyote. She was going west, visiting her relations. That's what she said. You got to watch that one, tricky one, full of bad business. No, 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 no. That one says, I'm just visiting, going to see Raven. Boy, I says. And just so you know, like, there's a lot of bad grammar in here, because, you know, if you know anything about First Nation story, you know why this is happening. But I'm just gonna take myself out of this and just read this story objectively. Okay, all right, so she said, full of bad business. No, no, no. That one says, I'm just visiting, going to see Raven. Boy, I says, that's another tricky one. Coyote comes by my side, she wags her tail, make them happy noises, sit on my porch, look around with them teeth. With that smile, Coyote puts her nose in my tea, my good tea. Get that nose out of my tea, I says. I'm going to see my friend, she says. Tell those stories, fix this world, straighten it up. Oh boy, pretty scary that. Coyote fix the world again. Sit down, I says, eat some food. Hard work that, fix that the world. Fix up the world. Maybe you have a song, maybe you have a bad joke. Sure, says Coyote. That one wink her ears, lick her whiskers. I tuck my feet under that chair, got to hide my toes. Sometimes that tricky one leave her skin sit in that chair. Coyote skin, no coyote, sneak around, bite them toes, make you jump. I've been reading those books, she says. You must be a smart one, Coyote, I says. You bet, she says. Maybe you got a good story for me, I says. I've been reading about that history, says Coyote. She sticks her nose back into my tea, all about who found us Indians. So she's been reading about Indian history. Okay, so she said she's been reading history, says Coyote. She sticks that nose back into my tea. So we find out the first thing was basically about, and as we go deeper, we find that, you know, Coyote was actually having a conversation with a grandmother. It's like a sin. You know, when we're actually analyzing the story, you know, in our little tutorial, I was telling my professor, like, the scene, it's obvious that, you know, the grandmother was telling an interactive story where she puts herself in a story, and the coyote is interacting with the grandmother, although the grandmother was telling the story. Okay, so she's telling the story about indigenous history, about the Indians, but she was telling it to some people. We don't know whether they're children, but we know that there is the grandfather being present there. So it's like the grandfather and the grandmother, and she's telling the story, but she's putting herself in the story, just so you know. But this is the coyote, right? She says the coyote has been reading, and she said, I've been reading this book. She said, you must be, I've been reading those books. She says, the coyote says she's been reading these books, and she told the coyote, you must be one smart coyote. Okay, so I want you to have that in your mind. All right, cool. And she said, you know, she sticks her nose back in my tea, right? So the coyote sticks her nose back into the grandmother's tea, all about who found us Indians, right? Whole I says, and the grandmother is Indian, okay? And we can, you know, talk about what the tea actually represent, but I'm not wanting to bring confusion to you guys today. Okay, we're just reading this theory, we'll analyze it, and we'll link it back to scripture. How I says, I like those old ones. Them old ones are the best. You tell me your story, I says. Maybe some biscuits will visit us. Maybe some moose meat still come along. Listen to your story. Okay, she says, and she sings her stories, a story song. Snow on the ground, the snakes are asleep. Snow on the ground.